Good afternoon. My name is Katia Solchosh, and I'm one of the two presenters for today's session. I am one of the reviewers for the Journal of Biomolecular Technique, which is our professional association journal. I'm also on the committee of core rigor and reproducibility. And so I'm active with ABRF, like many of us. And in my paying day job, I'm a professor of pathology in the School of Medicine for University of Virginia, and I run the Genome Analysis and Technology core. My sidekick is Rina.
Can you hear me? So my name is Rina Lapidus. What do I say? I am.
You are right here.
I'm an associate professor at the School of Medicine at the University of Maryland, Greenbaum Cancer Center. I'm a cancer biologist by training. I run a very interesting core, very atypical here. It's called the Translational Lab, where we do in vitro and vivo and support early phase clinical trials. I think Katia asked me to join her because the nature of my core, I get very involved in people's work and I get a lot of publications. So I was kind of a good fit. So I think that's it. I am on the planning committee for the oversight committee for MAD-Sci. I'm also the assistant director of shared services at the Greenbaum Cancer Center at University of Maryland.
In Baltimore.
In Baltimore.
So we have attempted to put an outline together, but we want this to be free-flowing. So if you want to address other things that we're not addressing today, please be our guest. Very briefly, so I'm going to start talking, and then she's going to do the second and third section, because she's an overachiever. And so I'm going to talk about cores as expert peer reviewers, because as I said first, I'm a reviewer for the Journal of Biomolecular Techniques, but I also reviewed during my career as a scientist as well as a core for many journals, scientific journal as well as technical journal. I will briefly, define what are the roles of peer reviewers, what are the benefits first to us. And sometimes it's not obvious, but I hope by telling you the benefits, you might all flock to see me and become reviewer for our journal and other journals. And then hopefully she's going to engage you to publish. So this is our goal today. If we don't achieve anything, it's okay. It's just putting the little seed in the ground so that it grows. So I will give you some of my tips for reviewing, which may not be your tips, but this is things that has worked for me, that I learned over the years, because there's not a course out there on how to review or how to write, right? Important things is preparing your review. Sometimes we forget that after you review something, you have to prepare a good review to send to the editing manager. And then, as I said, Rina is going to be talking about core as authors of peer-reviewed publications. And the elephant in the room is how to get the PIs for whom we work recognize the cores in publication. So we are going to open a lot of cans of worms, right? So again, your participation is essential to this. So this is something I found on the website, and I couldn't find it again, so I cannot give the attribution. But I like this thing because it shows you the life cycle of a manuscript. So what happens is that when you write a manuscript, you submit the article to the journal of your choice, and you send it to the managing editor. And the managing editor will look at it, will receive it, and decide first, is it suitable for my journal or not? And if it is not suitable, it will tell you right away, saying, that's not good for me, and maybe you've seen that. They may suggest another journal to submit it to, but basically you've been triaged. So it's not a good feeling, but this is the role of a managing editor, and it's very important. Or they can decide, yes, this is good for our journal, and then now they are sending it out for review. And they may be sending it to you. So you can look at it and you can decide to either accept to be a reviewer or not. And then when you review the paper, you can decide, oh, this is really crap. And you send it back to the editor saying, no, my recommendation is not published. You have to explain why, though. Or you can say, wow, this is a very interesting paper, and you find some interesting point to raise so that the author can improve upon this. So this is called the revision. And then so once the paper is sent back for revision and you get the revision back, you can say, yes, they have addressed all the points, and then you make your recommendation to the managing editor. Go ahead, publish, it's going to be great, everybody's going to read it, and the journal impact factor is going to be raised. So that's the idea, right? Oops, did I finish? Yeah. And there's the case when sometimes they revise their paper and it's not good enough, and at the end it gets rejected. So that has happened. I have rarely seen a paper that I have reviewed or paper of mine that have been reviewed that are accepted right away. There's always a little something that you can improve upon. So why should scientific core staff take an active part in scientific publishing? And for us, scientific publishing is both the reviewing part and the writing manuscript part. So what I want to emphasize, and I know you guys know it, the cores are key elements of the research enterprise. We don't just provide fee for service, but we also represent the scientific expertise. And many of our cores, do the design of the experiment, they conduct the experiment, all that on behalf of the researchers. So why not take our place at the table, right? Because yes, we can. That was the original title for this session, yes, we can. But that was too politically charged, so we decided to tone it down. So our ability of making lasting contribution to science as a whole is what we all represent here. As reviewers, we offer the technical knowledge that some of the journals are looking for. That's why they are contacting you, to help with including rigor in scientific reporting. As co-authors, and you know that maybe better than me, but as co-authors, you can ensure that the report that you were working on and deliver data for is technically and scientifically sound. Because sometimes you do something for the PI, and then when you see what they are, no, this is not exactly what we did, this is what we did. So it's important as a co-author to be able to check, what's going to go out, especially for the work that you've done. As authors, and this is maybe where we are, some of us are we're not sure we can do that, but as authors of scientific report and benchmarking studies, we can be the front line to inform other scientists and cores on best practice. And I'm sure you are all aware of the Journal of Biomolecular Techniques. I'm going to be talking about that a lot. So my section, first, benefits of becoming a reviewer. There's a lot. It's not going to be all the benefits, but the one that I thought were most important. Well, first of all, when you read those papers, whether it's scientific or technical papers, you get an early look. You get a peek at potentially groundbreaking methodology and scientific discoveries. And that's a great place to be at. So this for me was the main attraction to become a reviewer, because I can see what people are working on, and it can help me establish my own expertise by keeping myself, informed on all the recent development and trends. Especially, for being a core director, I like to see what's in the pipeline for all the methodology. But as a scientist as well, I want to know what is going on and how we can understand disease modeling and all that. What is important is that because you're reviewing papers, it actually develops critical thinking skills that maybe you won't have if you don't do that. So, that's pretty cool. You also learn what mistakes to avoid as an author, because you can see, oh yeah, that's really badly written, and then you can take that home next time you are writing your own paper, because you can see, the other thing is that, wow, that was very well put together, and so now I'm going to have this as a way to write my paper better. So, so you gain experience writing and responding to constructive criticism, which is not a very easy thing to do. And let's not forget career development. So it enhances your reputation. The more you review, the more you're going to be asked to review, because they talk to each other, especially if you're a good reviewer and you have critical but constructive comments for the authors. If you do a bad review, they will not invite you back. So that's the regular. So it's always good because you can put that on your CV. Because a lot of us sometimes we are very limited in how we can show contribution to science and all that. And if you can put that, I'm reviewing for JBT, I'm reviewing for the Elsevier publication, the Journal of Biochemistry, or whatever. It's good for you because it shows the breadth of your scientific knowledge, and it shows your reputation that other people have seen that you are an expert at something that maybe your institution has not recognized yet. And then, as happened to us at times, especially within ABRF, you may find yourself on the editorial board of a journal. So having a relationship with the editorial, the managing team, it also help maybe, they're going to invite you to write review, and so there's like a lot of things that is good about being a reviewer. So I talk about that, but I did not define, so I have a definition here. Peer review is a process through which external experts are invited to scrutinize research material to advise the journal editor on the quality, validity, and suitability for publication. So I truly believe that we are at the heart, as reviewer, of the modern scientific publishing. We provide quality control, and we can be a benefit to the author because they may have missed something, and you may suggest something to them in terms of adding, doing additional experiment that is going to make their publication more solid and better. And it's always rewarding as a reviewer when you see the response to your critique and they say, thank you so much, I didn't think of that, and by the way, I added this to the, sometimes it's BS, but sometimes it's real, so you have impacted that. So there's a lot of nice things about. So I read somewhere that we are the sentinels of science, and I love that. So first of all, when you're invited to review a manuscript, don't take it as a chore. It's an honor because they are recognizing that you can contribute to the greater world of science, and that includes scientific and technology. For me, it's all one big thing. The editors usually choose the reviewers because of expertise in a given subject. You may think, oh, I don't have the expertise to do that, but then the reviewer say, well, I chose you because you have this and this and that. You're going to complement the other review that I have for this particular paper, or it can be a grant. So remember, this is a teamwork. Why we are the sentinel of science? Because the editor decision to publish or not publish will be heavily because of influenced because of the recommendation that you make. So you're going to impact, one person at a time here, is going to impact the direction in specific research area or specific method developments. It's going to impact the scientific progress. And this is kind of cool to do that. You're going to facilitate the sharing of important knowledge for the community. It's not going to be crap in, crap out, like we have for our instrument. It's going to be crap in, I stop it. And now those publications, they're not going to be, they're going to be of quality because of what I have done to make it of quality. So buy it or not buy it, but this is how I think about it. So some of the tips that I come up as a reviewer, scientific as well as methodology paper. So before you say yes, you may have your doubt, but I always think, oh, the subject is not within what I know best. Then I talk to the editor, and then that's when the editor might say, oh yeah, oh, I'm so sorry, yeah, I thought you were doing proteomics or something, or you were working on cancer, and you're actually working on rare disease, which was the case for me. Do you have someone else that you could suggest for me that is an expert in this and that? And then you can, feel free to ask one of your colleagues that is in cancer research to be so that's good. That's also your contribution. If you say yes, don't wait. Start right away, because, for some of you that have published, you submit your paper and then you agonize until you hear from the editor to see if it's going to be published or not. So as a reviewer, you are part of that problem. So be part of the solution, and if you say yes, just go for it. Don't wait. So you start right away I start right away by a cursive read, because then I want to flag if I have a conflict of interest. Do I know that person, and is it next door, and I really don't like his guts, and so I'm going to have a bias, and I don't want to have a bias. Or I may say, so whatever reason, it's okay. You go back to the editor and you explain, and they say, oh, okay, I understand. Or you don't even have to go into the details. Usually we don't have to worry about if it fits the journal scope, because this is the job of the managing editor at the beginning, but sometimes they miss it. This happened to me, with our journal, where, they missed that it actually was not quite the scope. And that's okay to share that, and the editor may agree or not agree. So this, contribution can be in all forms. What I have done a lot of clinical investigation before I came to UVA. So if there is no informed consent and you flag that, you need to stop, because this is not supposed to go out. You need to have, when you do human experiments. So, just look at it and say, do I have, okay, this is a patient, but do they have an IRB, do I have informed consent, all that. And if it's missing, just tell the editor, because the editor, also gave a cursive look and maybe missed that, he or she. And then what you can also see is that the manuscript is full of error, mistakes, missing reference, things that are all over the place. Don't continue, don't spend your time. Just send it back. And if you suspect scientific fraud or plagiarism, I have added that here because it happens. It has not happened to me. But if you suspect anything like that, your managing editor is your friend. Is not, So just be frank that it's going to be good to have this transparency between the two parties here. So contact your editor every time you have in doubt. Again, start your review right away, and then take plenty of notes, because there's going to be, nothing is perfect. And so when you read your abstract first, and then you see if the author what they are saying, makes sense or not. And I always do a quick PubMed review at the beginning, just because I know one of the questions from the editor when I do the reporting is it new, is it innovative, and all that. So sometimes I'm not on top of that, so I need to do the PubMed search. And then you can determine if it's new or if it reproduces a previous paper. Again, it has happened to me. I contact the editor, and then voila. Then I examine the methods, which I'm very keen on, because I am a methodologist, to make sure that whatever they found, it fits with, that they knew that what the methods were about, and so that they are not like, oh yeah, we did that method, and then this is what we found, and what we found cannot be achieved with that method. So we're good at that. That's why the editor will contact core scientists, because they know that they may miss that, and we understand the technique and we understand the technique and the limitation and the opportunity of those techniques, so we can judge that better than maybe other scientists reviewing. And something also, the statistical analysis. Sometimes it looks like it's it makes sense in terms of the statistical analysis, but when you think about it in terms of biological or clinical, it's not very significant. So that also, and if you're not sure about that, you can talk without sharing that paper, because this is something they send to you confidentially. So, but ask someone else if you're not completely sure if it's significant. Again, keep good notes. I remember the first time I did that, I forgot to write the notes. I said, what did I think about this already? What line was it in? So take good notes. If you find something, write the line number, because they send the paper to you. There's lines. That's going to be helping the author so to do the revision more easily, because then they understand where you were. examine the table and the figures to see if it matches. Sometimes it doesn't match. It's because they cut a figure from another paper and they put it in there. So, this is what you have to do. You have to be thorough. And the quality of the figures, and she's going to be talking about that a little more. When you read the result and discussion section, see if it makes sense again, because you know what is shown in those figures, you know what's in the table, and you want to make sure that there's concordance. Because sometimes the person that makes the figure or the table is not the person writing that section, which they should be all co-authors. So, of course, if the manuscript is well organized and concise, there's oftentimes the manuscripts are too long because they want to tell us everything, and you can make suggestions and the author will go, oh yeah, that makes more sense. And some of the time they will say, well, you know nothing about nothing. So, but you don't want to rewrite the manuscript. That was my mistake the first time I did a review for actually one of my professors that I was under way back when. She gave me that to review for her, and she said, oh, you didn't have to do all that. So I did not know at the time, but do not rewrite it. Now, the main important part for you, and it may be the more difficult for me, is to actually write the review to send back to the editor. So again, you have to be diligent, responsive, and responsible. And again, you have to start the review as soon as you accept the invitation. And you have to, what I do is I reread the manuscript. Once I have all my notes, I reread the manuscript one more time. And then I start the review using what the editor has provided me. A lot of journals have extensive questions about the manuscript, so just respond to each of them. Some other papers have they want more, they want like the long form. What do you think about it and relevance and all that. And what, you have to provide feedback and be objective, even if you don't agree with something, because it doesn't fit with what you found, you cannot, so you have to be careful on how you write the review. And avoid the vague comments. Like I said, you have to write line so-and-so so that everyone can see where you are in your comment and your constructive criticism. A critique is very difficult because if it's not constructive, it is just bringing negativity, and then the person is like a wall. So you have to be, providing avenue of let's open your mind and think about what could be better. And sometimes you misread what the intent was, and it gives a chance for the author when they send the revision back to say, and it's okay. I think the reviewer number 2 has misunderstood what we were trying to say, and that's fine. That's part of the transparency and the communication. And then again, I say it again 3 or 4 times, send your recommendation to the editor as soon as possible, and then be ready to receive a follow-up, a revised manuscript with the author response to your review. So what I expect, and I want to say that for people that send a specific manuscript to JBT, and when they respond to the critique, please respond to the critique. Don't say, here enclose the revised manuscript, because sometimes it's not just grammatical, it's actually a region where you can improve your manuscript. So if you want to improve it using the reviewer comment or not, just address that in your response or in your revision. I hate when they just send the thing back and they forgot to mention, that some comments that both reviewers had about the paper, whether it is a figure to change to make it more understandable for people to when they read the paper. And so yes, so be ready to do more work after you've done your work, because you may see something back. Most of the time, if it's just very few changes that you were asking or commentary, the editor is going to read it and say, yeah, I think this is well, and then they will accept without sending it back to you. And it's okay. Usually they send it back to you when there's more revision and when the 2 reviewers are not in agreement. 2 or 3 reviewers, depending on the journal. So I'm putting my hat as a member of the review board, the editorial board for the Journal of Biomolecular Techniques. We have a journal. It's the official journal of ABRF, and it's open access, and it's free for authors. ABRF is taking care of paying, everything that needs to be paid. It has a fairly fast publication times if you are following the criteria and if you respond to the to the comments from the reviewers. 2 to 3 months from submission to publication online, unless you're completely, you were off the mark and it's rejected right away. It's hosted by PubMed, so you can use that as a citation and you can add it to your list of publication. And because of the type of work we do, we learn from what other people in the BRF is doing. So it helps the core community with benchmarking studies. So please come to see me, accept invitation to be one of our reviewers, or say, hey, I would like to be a reviewer for JBT. And then submit your manuscript to JBT. Our journal is going to be as good as the type of manuscript we get from you guys. So if you want this index citation to rise, we need to bring our manuscript to JBT. Okay, and of course other journal, I understand that, but there is something that this journal can do for all of us here, and helps enhance. You're good? Yeah, good. Okay. All right. So now I'm gonna take any question. Sorry.
We thought.
Oh, okay. Maybe not. My boss is saying no.
We have one question from online. Katya, how can someone who has not reviewed before get their first invitation to do so? I.e., how does one make the impression needed to be selected as a reviewer? And this is Elke Kustershuk from Montreal.
Hi, Elke. Love you. So in my experience, as I said, I used to be part of a research team, and the doctor would receive and then would pass on things to me. There's a lot of professors that pass on a journal, a paper to review to their postdocs or students to give them this type of what do you call it? Experience. Publishing, if you publish and it's in a certain topic, that's what happened to me. I started publishing as first author or corresponding author, and so I started getting called from the journals, from the American Genetic, ASHG, the Journal for Human Genetics, and because I was related to whatever, so they asked me to be a reviewer. So that's what happened. For our particular organization here, if you want to be a reviewer for JBT, just contact Ron Orlando, who is our editor-in-chief, or contact me. I will pass it on. I have a thing here that I'm going to pass on, so that while she gives her talk, I'm going to give you that. Anyone that wants to be a reviewer, and Elke, I can add you to this list if you wish. But please put your name down. She said yes? She went like this? Okay. This is not being a sucker. This is being a member. This is member of the scientific community, which include the cores and the knowledge, the vast scientific knowledge that is in the cores, and it is untapped. And that's what we want to do today. We want to tap into that. So this is this is a little thing here. You write your email very clearly, and then I'll add you to the list of potential reviewer, because we never have enough. Because there's so many technology in our membership. So did I answer, Elke? Thank you. Thank you for the thumbs up.
We thought we'd go through most of the content before we open up for discussion, and we're hoping to open up for discussion after I finish my part. So just out of curiosity, how many of you are reviewers for publications? So not as many as I would have thought. And how many of you are authors on publications from your course? So, okay, great. That's very useful. Thank you. So I'm here to talk about how to become the ultimate conversation will be about how to publish papers and how to become co-authors or authors on as a core director. So I think that as a core director and as working in a core, most of what it's either going to be scientific, or technical, like research or technical. And for the most part, I think that it's a significant contribution that that data that we create that is a significant contribution that ends up in a publication. Or it could be a technical publication that comes directly from your core and your expertise. So, and on that side, the left side, are probably typical journals, and I did plug the Journal of Biomolecular Techniques, as Katya did a good job. Also biotechniques and other types of methodology-related types of cores. So I'm going to focus first on contribution, right? Doing research and having the research that's generated, or the data that's generated in your cores, go into publications, and what does that mean for you? So research performed within the core merits publication, right? It has to be of a certain quality. What kind of things do we generate in our cores that can lead to publications, right? It's figures, tables, conceptual, scientific input, and experimental design. So how many of you as core directors or working cores speak to investigators and talk about science?
Can I make a comment about
Yes.
that? Could you stop talking about exclusively core directors?
Oh, sure, sorry.
It's a major problem with this organization actually is it's too focused on
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I
Audience
appreciate that.
member is asking for our speaker to not exclusively refer to core directors.
I apologize. This is my first time.
This is for people who do not necessarily have the best hearing or cannot hear you, as well as for the people online. Sorry.
Okay,
So if you do ask a question or you make a comment,
I
please raise your
apologize.
hand for this. It's not you. I'm saying for the audience, please come use the microphone or ask one of us to come over to you.
No, I'm responding to your comment. I apologize. My first time speaking at ABRF, so I will, anyone who works in a core. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
But
I
yeah, that's
okay. So, how many of,
Can I ask something? Can you write technology that you're comfortable reviewing for? Sorry.
so how many of you, whether you're a personnel in a core or another role that you play in the core, how many of you actually sit with the people that use your core and talk about science and talk about methodology, right? And talk about how to conduct the experiment and help them plan the experiment, right? So therefore, we believe that your effort is worth getting cited for that, for whether it's authorship or whether it's an acknowledgement. My goal would be authorship, or it could just be an acknowledgement. I'm going to cover that. So I always say that science is a team sport, and it's not just one person in one lab or one PI doing the work, and we as people who work in the core, I think that we play significant contribution to science. So does work performed in the core warrant authorship? My big response is yes, it does, right? I'm sure that since most of you are in this room, you guys probably agree with me, right? So how do we convince the PI or the primary author to add core members as authors? And I'll tell you that I do run a core, and I've been doing it for 14 years. Before that, I worked in pharma, and before that, I was a postdoc. And so I'm old, but I'm old. But when I've been fortunate enough to, I told you before, I run a core that's more service oriented, so I have really tight relationships with a lot of the people that come to use my core. But I have really lobbied hard to get a lot of my core members and the people who work in my core publications as well, authorship, and been pretty successful. And the way I've done that is I build relationships with my users. Now, I don't know what kind of cores you guys work in or for or whatever, but my core's not huge. I don't have hundreds of users. You know, I have probably under 100 users. But since they come and talk to me, I talk to them, and I offer to do lots of things. I offer to write them the materials and methods section for the stuff that my core did. I offer to write the results section. I create the figure often. I write the figure legend, right? So I do all that kind of stuff. And if you're brave, you can actually mention authorship at one of those meetings. You know, like I set the I set the precedent up front. I give them the idea, I germinate, like, okay guys, think about this. How much are we as the core contributing to your publication? So we kind of do all that up front to set the expectation appropriately. So what are your responsibilities if you actually do contribute a figure or a table? Well, you have to generate data worthy of the publication. You have to create a publication-worthy figure. You know what I mean? We do Western blots, right? So I know that sounds crazy, what core needs to do a Western blot, but some people actually can't do it. They don't have all the things they need or the time or the expertise. So you just can't have smudges, right? It has to be beautiful. So we have to create beautiful figures that will go into a publication. Once again, I offer to write the methods section. For them, I offer to interpret the data, right? I'm not a statistician. I always say, hey, go find a statistician if you want to dig deeper, but I can do simple statistics, right? So, but I often tell them, please go find an expert. But I help them interpret the data. This is believable, this is not believable, let's do this again. Let's include these controls. I help them design the experiment. And for authorship, they send me the publication, just what Katya was mentioning earlier, and I read it to make sure that everything that we did as the core was correct in what they said, especially that they didn't rewrite it after I had sent them the materials and methods, or that the figure didn't change, or the legends didn't change, and that I've had a couple of experiences where I've said, I'm uncomfortable. Like I can think of one right away that I said, I'm uncomfortable putting my name on that paper because I feel like you didn't present the data that we generated well. So hopefully that doesn't happen very often. And just to be cute, make sure your name's spelled correctly, that your initial's correct on your authorship. I'm often the middle author, by the way. I've been lucky enough where I have a couple of instances in the last 15 years where I've been first or last. But for the most part, I'm in the middle, and I'm content with that because that was enough to get me promoted a couple times. So it's all good. So to review just this publishing and to be contributing to a paper and that we want authorship, it's derived from expertise and data generated in your core. Writing papers or even writing sections of them is an acquired skill that can be developed through writing and reading and reviewing and being part of it. I think that warrants authorship, and that once again, science is a team sport, and that we have to educate folks that people who work in cores have significant contributions. So just so that because Katya wrote the abstract, I wanted to make sure I covered just a little bit about actually if you're writing a manuscript. I'm not sure how many of you actually write a whole manuscript. I know that I don't do it very often. I usually just write parts and sections, but these are the parts of a manuscript. I'm sure you did it, maybe parts of it while you were in school or getting your education. Some tips for writing a manuscript or even for writing my parts. We usually decide what journal we're going to choose first so we get the format right away. There's nothing worse than writing a whole manuscript and then saying, we're going to send it to another journal. Sorry. And then you have to rewrite the whole thing in the correct format. I think the abstract for me is the hardest because that's exactly the meat of what you're going to talk about. So I usually do it in bullet points and then I fit my words around it and make it into a cohesive paragraph. We put our figures and tables into a PowerPoint, and so that therefore you can move them around easily as you're deciding what flow to use, whether you want figure 1, figure 2, figure 3. Oh no, you know what, figure 3 should be figure 2, and then you can switch it easily, and that's actually usually how we present it to the journal. Once again, science is a team sport, so we have our authors co-edit. You write, right? You don't have to write the whole thing. You can have your co-authors help. And I think it's an important thing, and Katya mentioned this as a reviewer, it should have one voice. So if many people are writing it, you should go back and make sure it sounds like one person wrote it, so it's one voice. Often I've read papers where I say, oh, this is a different sounding, and you can tell that they just kind of put it together, right, that different people wrote it. So just reminders, and Katya and I talked about this before. I don't know how many of you are aware of your scientific integrity office in your universities. Have you guys? It's a very, very big thing now. There's software now that detects errors and fraud, and I know that it's uncomfortable to talk about, but
got to just say it in this kind of setting. Do not make up data. The data is the data. Do not adjust figures. I have a very close colleague who was called before this panel because they thought that she had flipped her Western blot, and that she had used literally a Western, and they had thought that she had just used the same control, like the control antibody for like 3 different blots. And they had reviewed a publication that from like 5 years ago. And she had to go in front of a panel and prove that she hadn't do it and go back to her notebooks from 5 years ago and say, no, this was accurate. It wasn't the same one. So data integrity is significant. And these publications now have very advanced software that can detect fraud. So that was just a comment. The last part, before we can have a dialogue or all of us can start talking, is core recognition, right? So we think it's a big problem, right? So I know that at my institution, we talk a lot about getting the cores recognized, right? And we also talk a lot about how do we know that they published? And how did we know that, right? How many of you at your institutions need to demonstrate that you've actually been part of a publication, right? We do, we have a lot of institutional grants. So we all know that this is a big problem. We need recognition for our institutional grants. Cores need to prove to their institution that they've had impact, and one way to do that is through publications. And it doesn't have to be authorship. It can be, at the minimum, acknowledging the acknowledgements. Right? So that's the minimum. And make sure, even include it in the method section. As you're writing your method section for these people, you could say, done by blank core, right? So therefore, that's another way to throw it in there. And then ask for authorship, as I've already discussed. And I think it's really, really hard. We talk about this all the time, I know that I work in a cancer center, so every 5 years we have a P30 that goes in. Has anyone ever had to work with it? It's a 5-year infrastructure grant, right? And I have to prove that my core has had a role in how many publications. And the more prestigious they are, the better score I get, and the more funding I'll get or will get. So it's that's tough, and that's a conversation. I think it's a work in progress that we're still working on. So how do we change? How do we do this? So I think the important thing is that we educate the PIs that we're scientists, right? We already just had this conversation that we sit down with them, we have scientific discussions, we help them plan their experiments. I know rigor and reproducibility is a critical factor when you're talking about cores, working in cores. I think that happens when, so speak up, advocate for your core. At initial meetings, set expectations appropriately. At the minimum, we're expecting you to acknowledge in our acknowledgments. And when they don't, I actually go back to them and say, hey, you know what? I found that article. Next time you publish, can you please mention us in the acknowledgments? I don't take them out for dinner. There's nothing inappropriate, but I try to establish a rapport with the PIs that work with the core, and I try to garner support from my institution. So I think that your institutional leaders need to be supportive of the cores and have your directors, your department chairs, your center directors talk all the time about how we have to recognize cores and we have to acknowledge cores. And I think that's my last slide. So Katya, come back up. So now I'm hoping that we can open up for discussion and talk about any of the points that either Katya and I talked about, and if you guys have had problems or issues or questions, and how you've addressed them, if you have other ideas about how to address them. And if I have to stand up here, you do too.
And this is very informal, okay? So
She gets to walk around. Anything anyone want to talk about? Any experiences that they've had publishing? Oh, here's some.
do you have someone here?
Thank you. Well, hi, I'm Sue Weintraub, and Magnus and I have extensive experience from the Journal of Proteome Research. I'm the former associate editor, Magnus is now. But in the core context, I wrote down immediately, I don't know how many of you have gotten the comment, well, if I make you a co-author, then I don't have to pay for the service. And I explained to them that even if it's my own grant, I have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, admittedly, I was born on Friday the 13th, but if we discuss publication before the experiment, it fails. So I don't usually talk about it, but most of the time, people, at least at my institution in San Antonio, Texas, so it's not, I guess we're more friendly there, are, if I know about the publication, are more willing to at least acknowledge. But from the point of view of the reviewer, I just want to have one comment. It's true, it's important to increase the time, but editors are so desperate for good reviewers that if you get an invitation and you're interested in doing it, but you're swamped, write back and say, I'm interested, I can't start on it for 2 or 3 weeks, is that okay? And many times they will immediately say, yes, right. So remembering that the editor, from a author and reviewer point of view, the editor is one of us. And communicate with them and they'll be happy to work with you on both sides. And I want to stress also the RRID that you can have. Okay, and that is one really great way to make sure your core is known of who's done the work. Thank you for bringing up very important points.
Thank you very much. I think this, what your comments are right on point. It's wonderful. And yes, RRID in the acknowledgement, because then they can trace you back to what the core. And if you don't know what IRRD is, just come and talk to us at the end.
I was going to comment.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that I do now with my data releases is I write out the methods. So I provide a data summary sheet every time that I release data to a customer. And I provide a summary that's essentially a methods section. And I include in there, this work was done by my thing and my RRID, so that they can literally just copy and paste that into their paper or take it and modify it. And then I also put in the notes section in that summary sheet, please acknowledge this work. And I've actually, because the core marketplace, which generates the RRIDs for you, goes in and harvests any articles that are published with your RRID and sends you an email. I've actually gotten notifications about papers I had no idea had been published. So I also strongly advocate for the RRID.
Hi, just to kind of piggyback off of what you're talking about, one of the things that we started doing, I'm an optical image analyst at the Van Andel Institute, so I mostly do data analysis on my end. And one of the things that we've started doing is writing up an SOW where at the very bottom we have the client sign that at minimum they will acknowledge our core in their publications, as well as if the work that we do rises to the level of authorship, that's something that they would do, and we provide the RRID. So at least we have like some signed documentation that they will acknowledge like the contribution that we're gonna do, and they'll do it appropriately. But I also had a question about like being kind of more of like that expert reviewer, and just kind of wondering, I've heard some rumblings about like the idea of like technical reviewers and things like that, and I'm wondering if you guys have a pulse on like where that area is kind of going for scientific literature in general.
A technical reviewer?
Yeah, so like not necessarily like an expert in the field, but like an expert in like say image analysis or Western blots or something like that.
I feel like I get asked to review for lots of journals, and I get asked to review for lots of journals. Probably once again because I'm old and I've been around for a while. So I feel like a lot of my reviews are very technical, because I'm not an expert I'm a cancer biologist. I'm not an expert in every nuance, but so a lot of my comments tend to be very technical. And Katya and I were talking about this earlier. Like, I rely on those other reviewers to do the thing that they know, and even like the statistics when I review a paper. And maybe Katya has an answer to this as well. I say, you know what? I can look at the statistics, but you should have an expert look at it. Or sometimes I review medicinal chemistry papers, and I'm like, okay, I can review the biology in this medicinal chemistry paper, but you're gonna have to rely on a chemist to review the rest of it. So I feel like I am the technical review, and if they've asked me to do it, and as a person working in a core,
then they kind of know that. But do you have another opinion?
Yes, and so this has happened to me on grants also. So today we're talking about manuscript and all that, but you will be asked also to review grants from the NIH or NCI or the other. And I went back to the program manager and I said, I'm not, I can't do that. And he said, no, I only want you to be the technical reviewer for that grant. So, and definitively for JBT or biotechnique journal, they're asking you for your technical, reviewship. So, and someone was mentioning that you can become a professional reviewer and actually get paid for that, right? So there are also avenue that you can. I don't know how to do it because I'm still, very engaged with the science and the core, running a core. But there's, career opportunity as a technical reviewer. And maybe, do you want to talk about that or no?
I could for a second.
Okay.
Yep, we have to wrap up. So
I
last
had an
comment.
insider, but I didn't know if it was an official.
Katya,
Yeah, it's not. So
this is our last comment because we have to wrap up.
I'll
But
be really
please,
fast.
no, please.
So when I was working in a core and running a core, I was actually being a freelance editor versus a reviewer. The reviewing is a whole separate thing, science. But if a journal had rejected a paper and wanted further editing done on it, then I would help the authors to kind of clear that up. So that's a slightly different field, but it is something that's really awesome to do if you love to write and you're, technical scientist. But the reviewing is a whole, I think unpaid is really important because it's a whole different kind of cup of tea. So.
Go ahead, one more comment, please.
So it's sort of a follow-up on the question about technical reviewers is that a lot of papers now contain methods and specifically computer code, and they say, hey, there's this method and you can download this code and get it to run, but in my experience most of the time it doesn't. So what kind of responsibility does a reviewer have to actually make sure that things in the paper work, like computer code?
It's hard. I mean, I just have one comment to that. Maybe detail,
Maybe detail, how much detail a method has, because it's hard to repeat something if it doesn't have enough information. But lots of journals have limits, like, Nature. How many people have read a Nature paper where there's no information?
Why should a reviewer actually test the code?
Yeah. Did you have?
Just quickly.
So very quick, I'm associate editor for Journal Proteome Research, and I'm primarily looking at all the proteomics informatics papers that come in. And I do try to encourage at least one of the reviewers to check out the computer code. And often we have the special issues about software tools, and then also the guest editors and I look at the code and make sure it's documented also, available, and at least that it runs. So we like to see it on GitHub or some other repository like that. Yeah. Thanks.
So we have to close the session, but Rina and I, we were expecting 5 people and we get 50, and we have to wrap up because there's a session coming after us. But this is wonderful. Thank you so much.